Okay, first of all, I want to begin by letting everyone know that this shir has been sponsored b'schus refuah shleima for my father-in-law, Yeshua Yitzchak ben Sima, who right now is having a surgery. So, and for anyone who would like to in the future sponsor more shiurim for Yeshivas Yedid Melech, they're more than welcome to do that on our website. Thank you. That's the more important part. Okay. When I was thinking about what to discuss on this week's Parsha, it wasn't very difficult because Kayadua, there's a very, very, very famous and important Ramban that I'm assuming most people know, and if they don't, it's a must-see after this. The Ramban on Parshas Bo is one of the Yesodis of Emunah, and it's the very last Ramban on the Parsha. For anyone who didn't have a chance, they must see it. It's Chizuk Ad Moed, and it's really one of the Yesodis of Emunah. In addition, this week was also started off in a very difficult way. I'm sure many people are aware that there was a terrible tragedy in Yerushalayim where two Tinagos Beis Rabban were taken from us, and it's something which we can't even understand, and it's something it's hard to fathom how that could happen. And with the study of Emunah, it can help us to understand and how to work on this. Sometimes when you say I'm talking about Emunah, so people feel most people I think get excited about it, but some people feel that either you have it or you don't. You have Emunah or you don't. You believe in Hashem or you don't. So then what's the point of discussing it? Rav Chatzkel Abramsky once said regarding that question that there couldn't be more off. He said, Emunah has madregas. It's not something you have, it's something you have to work on constantly throughout your life, and it's something which you can build yourself up in your Emunah, and there's somebody holding here in Emunah, somebody holding here in Emunah. There's different madregas when it comes to Emunah. And he says that there's no person who can say that they don't have to work on their Emunah. He says that he himself had to work on it every single day, and he brings from this week's Parsha, the Pasuk says, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu that as we know it, he says, I'm being machbid Paro's lave, and he says to Mulman to Sapir Ba'azni Vincha, Uven Bincha Eis Asher Salati Mitzrayim, in order so you can tell your children that which happened in Mitzrayim. Ves Eis Asher Samti Bam Vidatem, which is the key word, Ki Ani Hashem, and then you should know that I'm Hashem. So he says, it should say, if it's really for the future children, if it's for Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the future Dairis, it should say V'yedu. It should say, and they will know. Why is it Vidatem, and you will know? He says, because even Moshe Rabbeinu, who talked to HaKadosh Baruch Hu all the time, he had to work in his Emunah. Everyone is shaykh. Everyone has to be mechazik in their Emunah. There's an incredible Radvaz. The Gemara says that there's certain questions that were asked when we get to Shemayim. Everyone knows the famous ones, Masakta, the Piravirivya, where you kovea itim l'Torah. And there's a third one which is well known as Nasasa v'Nasata b'Emunah, were you honest in business? The Radvaz has a totally different take on this Gemara, and he says, Nasasa v'Nasata, were you Isaac b'Emunah in the Indian of Emunah? Were you Isaac in your lifetime on growing in your Emunah? Did you work hard on building up your Emunah, or did you know you just said, okay, I'm doing the mitzvahs, I don't think about it? That's one of the questions we're going to be asked in Shemayim. There's a scary Maisa that Rav Brevda brought. Rav Brevda once mentioned of Rav Elazar Tzadok Turchin, who was once, when he was a bacher learning in Chevron Yeshiva, he would very often when he was very young, he would go to the Chazon Ish quite often, and he has a lot of Maisim with the Chazon Ish. And on one such occasion, when he was by the Chazon Ish said something to him which shook him. He said, the Chazon Ish commented and said, it's scary how many people who are Yirei Shemai, there are so many people, who are constantly learning Torah Yom and V'layla, they're doing mitzvahs Yom and V'layla, and yet, when they get to Shemayim, they're going to find out that they actually had so little Emunah, and Hashem demanded so much more from them. So when he came back when this Reb Blazer came back to the yeshiva, and he told the Bachram what the Chazon Ish had said, they said, what does he mean by that? Like, go find out. So he went back to the Chazon Ish and asked the Chazon Ish, what did you mean by that comment? And he said, there's so many people who are they just are samech on the fact that the Emunah is there. They believe in Hashem, and they don't really think about it. And if you don't think about it, you don't contemplate about it, then he says, Chazon said, your Emunah is just going to actually dwindle. It's going to get worse and worse. If you don't work on your Emunah and you don't make it stronger, then it's going to get naturally will get less. So with that Akdam, I'd like to just read a little bit of the Ramban, and it's kedai for everyone to see inside. But the Ramban says, the Ramban is discussing why Yetzias Mitzrayim is such a vital and integral part of our Messiah that we mention it all the time. Why is Yetzias Mitzrayim at the forefront all the time? So the Ramban says, first he starts talking about in our tefillin. We have Yetzias Mitzrayim in the tefillin. We put it on the yad and the rosh, connected the lev and the mayach. And then he says that when it comes to this constant, the question he wants to really address is, why is it that Yetzias Mitzrayim is so integral? And the Ramban explains, maybe I'll read it outside, I'll say it outside for the time. The Ramban says that it's that throughout the minim, the heretics of the heretics, especially Mitzrayim, he said there's this constant belief that they had, which was that either HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't exist, or Hashem exists, but he was Azav Esolama, he left the world, or he exists, he's in the world, but there's no Hashgacha. Hashem just lets everything happen without him doing anything. And the way we counter that taina, the best way against, the biggest proof against this belief of the minim, against this kfira, is when you see a Neis Galoi. A Neis Galoi is the clearest reminder that Hashem's here, he's present, and he's constantly running the world. And the biggest time we ever had that before, the biggest portrayal of that was the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? Where Kosh Baruch Hu does the 10 makos, and then the culmination, the climax is with the Kriyas Yamsuf. That's something which there's nothing they could say back to that. Says the Ramban, however, Hashem doesn't do this midor lador. He only does this, he did it then. He doesn't do this midor lador. It's on us to constantly remind ourselves and give it over to the next generation, our children, to understand that this is what Kosh Baruch Hu did Mitzrayim. Hashem is with us in the world, and Hashem is constantly running the world and doing nisim v'neflois. There's nothing else in the world other than Kosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we're trying to show. And throughout all the mitzvahs that we're doing, we're trying to remind, Yetzias Mitzrayim is that reminder that if Hashem did this tremendous nes, then we should also see Kadosh Baruch Hu even in the small things. The Ramban also says that through that we'll see that even in the nisim ktanim that will come to see Kadosh Baruch Hu's yad, the yad Hashem, and he says this is really the tachlis of all the mitzvahs, really, that we sometimes we don't focus on, but every single mitzvah is really to bring out, to show that we're being maimin by Hashem, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one who's running the world. It's actually interesting, if you ever notices on Kiddush, on Leil Shabbos, we say two zechiros. We say Zecher Lietzias Mitzrayim and Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshis. Why are those two connected to each other? So there's a Sfas Emes, I think on Parshas Bo actually, that he says that when it came to Yetzias Mitzrayim, which was that the Neis Galoi that we saw, that was the biggest reminder to us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Bayre the Olam. So really the two are connected. It was only through Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu do a Kriyas Yamsuf, then we said, if Hashem could do that, then he also must have created the world too. We saw Hashem could do anything. That's why the two are connected. The truth is, Rabbi Chanan in Kovetz Mamarim is also an incredible must-see for everyone as well. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman in Kovetz Mamarim, this is actually this is just a likud of them. So in his very first two Mamarim there are all about Emunah. And his first one is actually asking a very important question, which is very shaykh to ask, very important to ask, which is, how are we mitzuvah to have Emunah b'Hashem? How can we be commanded to have Emunah b'Hashem? He has a lot of questions. One of them that he asks is, if even the greatest philosophers, they didn't believe in Hashem. Rav Chanan brings that we know Aristotle didn't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yet the Rambam writes in an Igeres that he was made about Aristotle that Sichlo hu lamata nevuah. He was right below nevuah. Dahainu ratzalaymar shilavada nevuah v'ruach hakodesh lo hayal chacham gadol kamaisa ba'olam. There was no one as wise as him aside for people of ruach hakodesh and nevuah. than Aristotle. So if he couldn't believe in a Kadosh Baruch Hu, how are we mitzvah? I mean, there might be people here who are very bright, but we're talking about, So Rav Elchanan actually says that he flips the total way around in the answer. He says actually the most pashut thing in the world to mamen b'Hashem. His lashon is Emunah b'shel Kadosh Baruch Hu baras ha'olam hu muchrachas l'chol ben das im rak yetze michlal shaita. As long as you're not a shaita, you're not crazy, as long as you have any das, you would realize that Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And you don't need any philosophy to figure this out. He goes on to speak out. It's a crazy thought to think that this world was created without a creator. How else did it all come? He said, where else do you ever see anything in the world that something was so well designed that there's actually a normal... Where else do you ever find a person tell you, this machine was not created by someone, it just, happened. And yet, when it comes to the Bria Sa'ilam, we somehow are okay with hearing, hopefully we're not okay with it, but we've become so accustomed to hearing that this world was created, it just happened. And that's like a normal stance. That's a normal opinion. Rav Elchanan says the only reason why Aristotle, and this is for another discussion, why Aristotle could have this kfira, he says that this kfira only comes about not because of a lack of chachma, but he says because he was marbe b'taivas. He says the greater the chachma, the more taiva a person has, and if a person has so much taiva, he says you can blind yourself from the truth. That's how a person can become so taken over by Olam Hazeh that he doesn't want to see the truth. There's a great story with one of the Rishonim, the Ibn Ezra, was once in a vikuach. He was in an argument with a person who was a heretic, a kofer. And they were going back and forth, whether Hashem exists, where Hashem created the world, and they were having this back and forth. And all of a sudden, the man, this non-believer, had to step out of the room for a minute, maybe go to the bathroom, whatever it was. While he had left the room, so the Ibn Ezra noticed that on the table in front of him, this person was in the middle of writing a poem. Kayadua, in those times it was even today, but in those times especially, all the Rishonim all have beautiful, in Akdamas, a lot of very nice poetry, especially the Ibn Ezra. So he saw it, and he saw he had a bunch of lines written, but he had 2 lines left that he hadn't filled the page. So the Ibn Ezra decided, while he was gone, I'll just fill out the page for him. And the Ibn Ezra starts to fill out the next 2 lines and makes this beautiful end of the poem. The guy comes back to the room, they start talking, Ibn Ezra doesn't make any attention, doesn't call attention to it, and all of a sudden, this man notices and sees, wow, we're so nice. He said, did you do this? And he said, no, not me. So then who did it? He said, no, and I'll tell you what happened. It was the craziest thing. The ink that you had over there went flying, and it spilled, and it went this big splash, and just boom, like that. And this heretic right away said, are you crazy? And he said, that's what you say the exact same thing when it comes to Kadosh Baruch Hu creating the world. That just happened. Similarly, very similar Maisa. There's a great story with this Rosh Yeshiva from Kol Torah named Rabbi Chanan Kronstadt, who once was in a store here in Eretz Yisrael. I'm sure many can relate to this point where he walked into the store and lo and behold, behind the counter was no one. We're very familiar to seeing here. For those of our friends abroad, you might not see this as often in the States, but it's a common occurrence for some of us here when you need your local grocery and the man behind the counter is not there. Stepped out for a few minutes. It's a common thing. Anyways, as Rav Elchanan Kronstadt is there in the store, another man walks in to buy some groceries, and this man was clearly from his appearance, not religious and not a believer. And the man says to Rav Elchanan Kronstadt, he says, where's the owner? He said, actually the store has no owner. It's what does that mean? He's like, the store just does not have an owner here. That's how this one works. It's well, how does it work? Who sets it up and who opens the door? Who turns on the lights in the morning? Who put all these? He said, no, it's very simple. I'll tell you what happened. It's a crazy story. With a straight face, Rav Elchanan Kronstadt went on to tell him. He said, what happened is, right, apparently this was near Haifa. He said, in that port in Haifa, there was a big explosion the other day. All these particles went flying, and they landed in this store, and made it so beautifully set up. But he said it with a straight face. Now, I'm laughing. But he said it with a straight face, and he said, with all the rows and everything, and the doors open, the lights went on, it was perfect. And it's been like this ever since. And the man, after hearing this, thought Rav Elchanan was being serious, and he's like, you have to get yourself serious help. We are going straight to, you are totally lost. And he says, And then Reb Chanan famously then set it up nicely and said, I lost it, you lost it. You think I'm crazy with that? You say the same thing about Kadosh Baruch Hu. You say that the world just came from a big boom and that's how it all happened. Now, obviously, even with all this, even with all the understanding from Emunah, there's two ways of working on our Emunah. Obviously, there's a sichli. We have to work on it through our head, through focusing on HaKadosh Baruch Hu and realizing that the world was created through Hashem. But there's also the avodah shebelev, which is the more important part of Emunah, which is internalizing and making it part of our life, in our hearts. We say by Az Yashir, we say, Zek Keli v'anvehu, this is my Hashem v'anvehu, Elokei Avi, the God of my father, v'aroi mimenu. So, Reb Aaron Belzer once asked the question, which is, what's the difference between, why do we say Zek Keli, and then we say Elokei Avi? Why do we switch from my Hashem and then Hashem and my father? He says, because there's two yesodis when it comes to Emunah. There's the sichliest, when you come to Emunah, there's the rational approach of having Emunah, but then there's a totally different one, which is the Elokei Avi, the Messiah, the Emunah Pshuta that you got from your fathers as a child when your parents told you, but to believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that Emunah, he says, is V'aram Mimenu. That one's much higher, much greater, because that one, the one that comes from, that's just the Emunah Pshuta, that one nothing can stop. That no matter what tragedy you have, the one that comes through Das, that one can be affected, but the one that's through the Lev, nothing can stop it. Yabar Benel once commented about the Jews during the times of the Inquisition. He said that he mamash saw this Nakuda in front of his eyes, that who were the ones who stayed strong. He said it was fascinating to think, everyone preached the Emunah, there were people who were mamash, he says, much more learned. And then there was the Pshutei Hamayinam, the Pshutei people. Those are the people, he said, that were the ones who were Meiser Nefesh and gave their lives up. He said he learned from there that the people of the Emunah Pshuta, the simple Emunah, believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Torah and His mitzvahs, those are the ones who were willing and gave up their lives without any other questions. Some people, the people maybe more learned, wasn't as easy. Doesn't necessarily mean that a person who's more learned can't. But the point is that the Emunah Pshuta is something we all have to work on. Rav Victor Miller famously once commented, and I think we once mentioned this in one of the Vada maybe, that Rav Victor Miller once commented, they say b'shem him, that he once said, today's door is incredible with the Shmiras HaMitzvos, like in terms of all the different things, with all the Hidurim that we have that we didn't have in the olden days, like the Dugma, just the processing of our tefillin is so much better than they used to have. Or when it comes to the matzahs, we have the machines and every different thing. We have so many kalim that we can use. He said, and we're so makbid on every single hidur that our grandparents weren't able to do. But at the same time, says Rav Miller, when it comes to the simple emunah of the Babis and Zaydis of Europe, who may not have known that much, and we're not as makbid on the business, we fall to their toes. We're nothing. They had this emunah pshuta that by them, this is what our life is. We're living with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. I guess we'll end off with a Maisa, maybe two Maisim, because I see that everyone wants Maisim. So there's Kayadu Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, who we just quoted before in Kovetz Mamarim, who didn't just write it on Ksav. He wrote. We just read what he wrote. How simple it is to believe in Hashem. You have to be a shaitan not to believe in Hashem. But what's more amazing is when you hear about a person who did it, that he lived it. And Kayadua, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman was killed al Kiddush Hashem Yikom Damai, and we have an eyewitness account of what happened b'Shas Maisa when he was killed. And we know that he was in the middle of giving a shir. He was giving a shir on Maseches Nida. And the reason why we know the story is because Ephraim Ashri, who survived, was there, but they were outside actually on a bench. They were sitting and learning, and they were hiding from the Nazis at that time. And the Nazis came and found them. And he describes and writes the following. I'm going to read it because I think it's better than me saying it over, because it's very powerful, his own words. So he says, on that day, it was a late Sunday afternoon on Yud Aleph Tammuz, the 6th of July in 1941. It was in effect a day of mourning, a Tisha B'Av for this tent of Torah, because thousands of Jews in Kovna, in Slobodka, and throughout Lithuania had been arrested and tortured or murdered. We, Ashri now referring to the chevra that was hiding, a lot of Talmidei Chacham were there. We were sitting around a table in the backyard of Rav Avram Grudzinski's house on this hot summer afternoon. Rav Wasserman was teaching the daily daf of Gemara in Maseches Nida, and the Chachamim and students present were immersed in the intricacies of a complex Talmudic discussion when this happened. Suddenly, 4 Lithuanian Nazis pushed open the gate to the yard and marched in. Their shout was at first ignored because almost no one heard it. Certainly not the Chachamim present, whose ears were attuned solely to the words of Torah. When the Lithuanians noticed that the rabbis had not even reacted to their shout, they drew their revolvers and fired a few shots into the air. They sent a tremor through the group of learners, and everyone rose to their feet. The cynical laughter of the Lithuanians greeted their rising. One of the Lithuanians called out, "We know you were trying to organize a rebellion to go to Palestine, but we caught you. You won't get away with it." Another Lithuanian ordered, "Line up and follow me." The rabbis and scholars stepped into line, but the Lithuanians rearranged their captives. They placed Rav Wasserman at the head of the line, and next to him, Rav Zaks and the other rabbis with the more patriarchal visages. Okay, I don't know. Visages, thank you. I was placed last and managed to slip away. As Rav Avram Grudzinski, while the Lithuanians made their plans, Rav Wasserman addressed his fellow Jews. His voice retained its evenness and his face displayed the same solemnity. Help me out again. Solemnity, thank you. As always, thank you. He spoke as if he realized that these were his last words. There was nothing personal in his words. He did not even ask to say farewell to his son Naftali, who was in bed inside with a broken leg. He addressed everyone, and really all of Jewry. He said, Shemayim apparently considers us righteous people, for it wants us to atone with our bodies for Jewry as a whole. So we must do tshuva now on this spot. The time is short, and the 9th fort is near. We must make up our minds that we truly wish to be Mekadeshim Shemayim. If we do tshuva, we will thereby save the remaining Jews, our brothers and sisters, so that they will be able to carry on the remnant of Jewry. He continued, "Let us walk with our heads held high. Let no one think a thought that would disqualify this sacrifice. We are about to fulfill the greatest mitzvah, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. The fire that consumes our bodies is the fire that will rebuild the Jewish people." Ad kan l'shaynei of Rav Chanan Wasserman, and we know that they were taken later that day to be murdered. One more similar ma'isa, but just an unbelievable level that people can get to when it comes to Emunah. When the city of Telz was destroyed, so it was a terrible, they went through a lot. And at the very end, it was ran by the Rosh Yeshiva. His name was Rav Yitzchak. Rav Yitzchak Bloch, Rav Avram Yitzchak Bloch, and Rav Zalman Bloch was his brother. And we have this account from Rebbetzin Leah Osband, who later became the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva's Rebbetzin in America. So she described the following, that what happened at the end of the night before her father and uncle were taken al Kiddush Hashem. So she was 17 at the time of the destruction of Telz, and she wrote this following. The Lithuanians told the men to go inside and say goodbye to their wives and children because they're going to be killed the next day. The Rav, referring to her father, returned to his family. He was too exhausted to learn Torah because all the physical work they had been doing for the last couple of days. So he called one of his daughters to read out loud from a sefer of the Rambam about the halachas of Kiddush Hashem. She read to him for an hour, and instead of bemoaning his fate, her uncle, and this is the key line here, her uncle said the following. She heard her uncle say, Du bist gerecht, Ribbon Shalaylam, which means you are right. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are right, and dein Meisen seinen gerecht, and your actions are always right. And she said that the next day, her father and her uncle were murdered al Kiddush Hashem, and the Talmud who saw this said that her father was killed while saying Kriya Shema, and that the same student also mentioned that Reb Zalman, her uncle, had died with a smile on his face. May we be zaycha that, sorry to be so intense, but may we be zaycha that when it comes to Emunah, we should be able to build our Emunah and it's something we should to make stronger and stronger, that we can ourselves be able to overcome any challenges and see that the Yad Hashem is always, it's really all the taiv, whether we see it or not, and to be completely b'shleimus with our avodas Hashem.
We really hope that you're able to grow and enjoy with this amazing content that we just put together. Do us a favor. Don't just make it about you and me. Share this with the world. Get that Torah out there for everyone to see. Additionally, if you want to hear more, which we hope you do, you can subscribe to our content so that you can be up to date with all of the new amazing Torah that we have here in the yeshiva, pumping it out to you as the klal.